Alright, so my name is Nate. For those of you who don't know me, my lovely wife is Esther. My son Maddox was the one that needed consoling to go with Reese. He was a little bit freaked out. Yeah, a little bit. Whoa, what are we doing? Who's this lady? So Anatomy of Peace. Esther first read this book when she was going through what's called the Devash Urban Initiative, which is a cohort that takes people that are doing youth ministry in an urban context and teaches them kind of how to do that better, but it also deals with a lot of interpersonal stuff. And so Esther was telling me about this book called Anatomy of Peace, and she's like, we read through this book and it's life-changing, and just like it changes the way I look at interactions with people, and it changes the way I look at conflict, and I really think we need to read it. I'm like, okay, whatever. And so then later on, I found that book on audiobooks because I have a half-hour commute to work. So I tried to listen to audiobooks, and I found that they had it on audiobook. I was like, all right, so Esther wanted me to read this, I guess I'll read it. And then I started reading it, and it was one of those things where, like I mentioned earlier, Phil was going from preaching to meddling. I felt like that book was holding a mirror up in my face about the way that I deal with people and my attitude towards others. And so the basic context of the book is that it's a narrative. It reads almost like a novel. There's characters. The story takes place in a place called Camp Moriah, which is a real place. It's outside of Tempe, Arizona. And there's two, I don't want to call them professors, maybe they are professors. There's Avi and Yusuf, and they run Camp Moriah. And Camp Moriah is a camp for troubled teens. And what happens is it's kind of one of those programs where the courts will say to a teen, hey, you can either go to prison for however long, or you can go to this camp and spend 6 months, I think, or 6 weeks in the desert, in the wilderness. So that's what Camp Moriah does. But before they do that, they bring in all the parents of these kids, and they sit them down for 2 days and kind of give them a condensed version of what the kids are going to go through over these 6 weeks. Or is it 6 weeks or 6 months? I think it's 6 weeks. Anyway, and the reason they do that is because their whole point is that, yeah, these kids have problems or whatever, and they're troubled teens, and we're going to try and work with them and you know, get them to realize some things about themselves here at camp. But what happens when they go home to their homes? We want to make sure that their homes are now a safe place for them to build on all those foundational things that we did out in the wilderness. So we don't want them to have this amazing mountaintop experience and then come back home and everything's still broken, and then it's just the cycle is just gonna start itself all over again. So they bring in the parents and they say, okay, all these parents are gonna sit around in a circle and we're gonna kind of talk about this idea of peace and anatomy of peace. And so that's where the context of the story takes place. I think we're going to listen to some of the audio tonight. So you'll notice that it's the audio book. It's one reader doing a bunch of different characters. And so there's a few main characters. There's Avi and Yusuf. They're the ones that run the camp. And Avi is Israeli, and Yusuf is Arab. And so it's just kind of already interesting that an Arab and an Israeli run a camp devoted to peace, which is an interesting juxtaposition already. It's an interesting contrast. Right. And then so all the parents, there's, I don't remember all the names, I think it's Mike, Miguel, and Rita have a young girl in there. The main character's name is Lou. And Lou is a CEO of this company called Zagrum. And this book is, I want to say, I don't know much about the actual writing of the book. I want to say it's kind of like based on a true story. The names and dates have been changed to affect, to protect the innocent or whatever. But it's a true story from what I understand. This guy named Lou, who's a CEO at this company called Zagrum. Just before the story, so we enter the story, and he's being dragged to this thing by his wife because his son Corey is one of these troubled teens. Is this making any sense to anybody? Yeah. Okay, because I know I'm just kind of shotgunning it. So, so their son Corey is going through this program. His wife, Carol, thank you, said we need to go to this weekend. And well, right before he leaves for this weekend, as I said, he's the CEO of this company, president of this company. 5 of his top management people basically left and said, we can't work under you, and he called it a mutiny. Like 5 people said, we can't work under you, you're a bully, we, you know, whatever, we leave. And then after this catastrophe happens at work, his wife is like, hey, we need to go spend a couple of days in Tempe dealing with our son. And so this whole relationship comes up about Lou and Corey is the screwed up one of their, I think they have 3 kids. Lou is a Vietnam vet, was in the Marine Corps. I think he did 2 tours. So he's very much the, you know, kind of machismo, kind of man's man. You know, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you do it. Do what you need to do. And when he deals with Corey, he's very much the, you know, it's like you just do what I tell you to. Do what I tell you to. And if you're not doing what I tell you to, then you're wrong, kind of a deal. And so they come in and they all this is going on in the context of Lou's mind. Like I said, he's the main character, so the whole story kind of takes place from Lou's perspective. And they start talking about conflict, and they start talking about what the underlying issues are within conflict. And what they basically boil it down to, and by they, sorry, I mean Avi and Yusuf, is they say that in any conflict or any situation where I'm dealing with people, I am looking at that person either through a heart of peace or a heart of war. And they call that the way of being. So my way of being towards Ed in any particular situation might be at a heart of peace. That might be one way of being, or a heart of war is another way of being. There's only 2. And sorry, I know this is a book where there's so much to unpack. So you got these 2 ways of being, heart of peace and heart of war. And what that means is, how many have heard the term, it's not what you say, it's how you say it? Raise your hand if you've heard that term, right? So it's like, well, it's not what you say to me, it's how you say it. Well, sorry, let me kind of define these 2 terms, heart of peace and heart of war. Again, I know I'm being kind of scatterbrained.
That's all right.
If you have questions,
we're going to unpack it. We're going to unpack it.
Oh, we're going to unpack it. Okay. So if you have any questions, shoot up your hand and I'll try and answer them. Because I know, like I said, I'm kind of shotgunning it here. So you've got a heart of peace, which means that my attitude towards somebody, my heart towards somebody, my way of being towards somebody, sees them and values them as a person. Sees that they have needs, that they have wants, that they have desires. Sees that they have their own baggage just like I have my own baggage. So that's the heart of peace. That's the one way of being. The other way of being is a heart of war. And a heart at war, when my heart is at war towards somebody, instead of seeing them as a person with wants, needs, desires, and instead of seeing you know, that imago Dei, that image of God in that person, instead of seeing that, I see them as an object. And I see them either as an object that stands in the way of me achieving a goal, or an object to help me get to a goal. So basically, I'm objectifying that person. They have ceased to become a person. They have ceased to become the image of God incarnate in somebody, and now they are a thing that I need to use, or a thing that I need to overcome, or I need to push out of the way. And the way that that kind of translates itself to what I was asking about the, that's not what you say, it's how you say it. This book, I think, would argue that that statement is completely false. Because it's not about what you say. It's not even about how you say it, but it's about your heart towards the person in that moment. So I can say, well, the example I used in our group, right, is I can ask my son, Maddox, to pick up his toys. Simple thing, right? How is my heart towards him? Is my heart towards him out of a heart of love and a heart of peace? And am I seeing him as the beautiful creation, the image of God in a little 2.5 foot tall dude? Or am I seeing him as a kid who will not pick up his toys? Right? That's 2 ways to see my own son, my own lifeblood, right? And sorry, I just had one of those thoughts and just left me. But so I can see people out of a heart of peace or a heart of war. I can see them and value them as people, or I can see them as an object which must be overcome, or an object that must be used to help me achieve a goal. And so that's kind of what the main conversation in this book boils down to is that at any given moment, I remember what I was going to say. When we're talking with somebody, when we're interacting with people, we are interacting to them through this heart of peace or through this heart of war, that person reacts to us, but they're not reacting to what we're asking them to do. They are not reacting to the thing that we are saying. They're not even reacting to the way we're saying it, but they're reacting to my heart, to my way of being. So again, if I ask my son, hey, I need you to pick up your toys. If he realizes that I'm at a heart of war towards him, and that I have a heart of war towards him, he's reacting not to me asking him to pick up his toys. He's reacting not to my tone of voice, because I could have said, hey son, I really need you to pick up your toys. I could have said it in that tone of voice, but he's not reacting to that tone of voice. He's reacting to my heart. He's reacting to the way that my way of being towards him. He's reacting to, I'm an object right now, or I'm a person right now that has feelings, that has value. And that is interesting because we can see that heart of war with other people. And we can see it in ourselves. And it's something that we don't even have to know about consciously, but you can tell how many people had that experience where somebody just said something and you just knew. It's like that they are not about me right now. Like they don't care about me right now. And that's kind of that lived out, right? It's that you're reacting to their heart. You're reacting to their way of being towards you, right? So we don't react to the task. We don't even react to how the task is relayed, but we react to the way of being behind the way it's being relayed, behind the task. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? So, anyway, I think that's kind of right where, I'm going to give you a quick little thing in the book in chapter 3. They talk about named Saladin, and he was the leader of the Muslim army in one of the Crusades, or two of the Crusades. I don't know. There was a few crusades. He was the leader of the Muslim army, and they use him as an example of a heart of peace, because Saladin was at war, or his people were at war with the Christians. So the Christians held Jerusalem. Saladin and his army came in and recaptured Jerusalem. So now Jerusalem is a Muslim city. Kicked the Christians out. But they talk about the way that Saladin was towards his enemies. And it's really interesting in the context of this book because, like I said, the main character's name is Lou, and he's a Marine. And I'm a veteran myself, so I kind of relate to some of the things that, that Lou talks about, well, you're going to be seen as weak, right? So if I have a heart of peace towards my enemy, he's going to see me as weak, and he's going to take advantage of that. Well, there's a story that kind of that they tell about Saladin and a leader named Balian. And has anybody here seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom? No. Anyway, it's about this. So the Muslims come in and they conquer the city. They take the city. The Christians flee. The Crusaders flee. And this guy Balian has his wife. He's up in, I want to say, Damascus, and his wife is in Jerusalem. He writes to Saladin and says, let me go into Jerusalem and get my wife. I just want to keep her safe. I'm not going to take up arms against you. I just want to go in and get my wife out. So everybody's like, Saladin, you can't do this, you can't do this, that's a sign of weakness, you can't do that, you can't let this guy come in, he's going to do all this and all that. And Saladin not only says, okay, you asked me for this, you asked me to come in and that you could come in and take your wife and take her back to Damascus. He says, not only will I do that, I will give you an armed guard to escort you from Damascus to Jerusalem. I will then allow you to get your wife and your family and pack up your belongings, and I will give you an armed escort back to Damascus to make sure that none of my people kill you. Because you've come to me and you've asked me, and I value you as a person. I mean, he doesn't say all this, but that's the inference, right? I value you as a person. I don't just see you as my enemy. You are my enemy in this context, but you're a person too. I'm going to let you come in. I'm going to let you get your wife and your family and your belongings. I'm going to let you go back to Damascus. So Balian goes from Damascus to Jerusalem, and while he's there, he sees the complete and utter ruin that Jerusalem is in, and how the Christian armies have just been, the walls have been torn down, and he just loses it. He gets depressed. So he writes another letter to this general, Saladin, and says, Saladin, I know I gave you my word I wouldn't take up arms against you, but I got here and I saw the city and it's just a wreck. Can we rebuild the walls? Can I raise up an army to defend the city? And all of Saladin's advisors are like, no, absolutely not. This guy told you that he wasn't going to take up arms against you. And Saladin says, yes, I will let you do that. I will let you build up the walls. I will let you raise up an army. I will allow you to defend the city, and I'm not going to kill you. And that's just like mind blowing. It's like what this guy negotiated something and then went back on it, you know? But Saladin was able to do that because he had a heart of peace. He didn't see Balian as an object. He saw him as a person. And again, that's kind of what they were talking about just before, I think, right before the chapter that we're going to listen to.
Yep.
So anyway, again, the whole thing is dealing with people out of a way of being of peace, a heart of peace or a heart of war. Seeing as people as that imago Dei, seeing them as the image of God, seeing the image of God in them and valuing that in them, or seeing them as an object, and how we objectify people. And that's just, again, that's the main crux of the book, and how do we get from being in a heart of war to being in a heart of peace, and noticing when our heart is at war towards somebody. So you get that that terminology. You get, my heart is at war towards this person. My heart is at peace towards this person, and that's they'll kind of talk about that. And so that's what that means when they say heart of peace. It means, you know, seeing the image of God, seeing value in the person, and they'll talk about way of being. And so if you think about that way of being, that's heart of peace or heart of war. So that's kind of just to kind of define some terms for you. So I think we're going to listen to that. And
yeah.
Am I good?
Perfect.
Awesome. Cool.
You're good.
Thank you, guys.
I just want to set the stage for what you're going to listen to. First of all, it's not a Christian book. But what's interesting is the ideas that he was talking about come from a Jewish philosopher. So there is some Christian basis in here, but the authors of the book didn't come at it as, we are going to write a Christian book. It was just more about peace. And there is this truth that comes out of Jewish philosophy, out of Christian thinking, so to speak. And so this is what we're going to walk into. Just imagine, if you will, all these people brought their kids, and then they're all sitting in a room and the kids have been taken somewhere else. I know that's hard to imagine right now, but try anyway.
What are we imagining again? I'm just going to go there.
We're here in this room, and this is the adults, and they're already talking about getting into these things that Nate is talking about, but they're now going to really get into it. Okay? So just sit in the room, and one of the cool things to do in a situation like this is just kind of figure out which character you identify with. All right? You might not have a military background, but you might have that same kind of thinking, like, hey, I'm right. Right? My way or the highway. It's not all that common.
This comment knocked Lou completely off his stride. He was not accustomed to people standing up to his sarcasm, and Yusuf's even bolder development of his thesis and his pointed comment about Lou's corporate troubles caught Lou off guard. He looked sideways at Carol, whom he surmised to have been the source of the inside information. She stared stiffly ahead, not acknowledging his gaze. Chapter 4. Beneath Behavior. Just then, one of the young employees of the company walked in the room and whispered something to Yusuf. Excusing himself, Yusuf quickly followed the worker out of the room. After he left, Pettis said to Avi, "I'm not sure what Yusuf meant by a heart being at peace. I'd like to hear more about that." "Sure," Avi said. "To begin with, let's compare Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem to the earlier capture by the Crusaders." He looked at Pettis. Do you notice any differences in the two victories? Certainly, Pettis responded. The Crusaders acted like barbarians. And Saladin? He was almost humane, for someone who was attacking anyway, he added. Say more about what you mean by humane, Avi invited. Pettis paused to gather his thoughts. What I mean, he finally said, is that Saladin seems to have had regard for the people he was defeating, whereas the crusading forces seem to have been barbaric, as I said before. They just massacred all those people as though they didn't matter at all. Exactly, Avi agreed. To the initial crusading forces, the people didn't matter to them. That is, the Crusaders didn't really regard them as people so much as objects or chattel to be driven or exterminated at their will and pleasure. Saladin, on the other hand, Avi continued, saw and honored the humanity of those he conquered. He may have wished that they had never come to the borders of his lands, but he recognized these were people he was doing battle with, and that he therefore had to see, treat, and honor them as such. So what does this have to do with us? Lou asked. You're talking about a 900-year-old story, and a story about war at that. What does it have to do with our kids? Thinking of what Yusuf had said about his company, he added, and our employees. Avi looked squarely at Lou. In every moment, we are choosing to be either like Saladin or like the crusading invaders. In the way we regard our children, our spouses, neighbors, colleagues, and strangers, we choose to see others either as people like ourselves or as objects. They either count like we do or they don't. In the former case, since we regard them as we regard ourselves, we say our hearts are at peace toward them. In the latter case, since we systematically view them as inferior, we say our hearts are at war. You seem to be pretty taken by Muslims' humanity toward others and others' inhumanity toward Muslims, Avi, Lou objected. I'm afraid that is quite naive. He thought of what he knew of Avi's history. And surprising, coming from one whose own father was killed by the people you are lauding. Avi heaved a heavy sigh. Yusuf and I have been speaking of no one, Lou, but Saladin. There are those who see humanely and those who don't in every country and faith community. Lumping everyone of a particular race or culture or faith into a single stereotype is a way of failing to see them as people. We are trying here to avoid that mistake, and it seems to me that Saladin is a person we could learn from. Lou fell silent in the face of this rebuke. He was beginning to feel lonely among the group. The contrast between Saladin's taking of Jerusalem and the Crusaders' taking of Jerusalem, Avi continued, teaches an important lesson. Almost any behavior, even behavior as stark as war, can be done in two different ways. At this, he went to the board and drew the following. At the top of the whiteboard, he wrote the words, "The Way of Being diagram." Beneath this, he drew a circle within which he wrote the words, "Behaviors, invading Jerusalem, paying people from treasury." Beneath this circle, he drew a dotted line, and beneath that, the words, "Way of Being." Beneath these words, he drew a circle and a square next to each other. Within the circle, he wrote the words, "Heart at peace. Others are people. Hopes, needs, cares, and fears as real to me as my own." Within the square, he wrote the words, "Heart at war. Others are objects, obstacles, vehicles, irrelevancies." He then connected these two shapes to the circle above them with two lines. "Think about it," Avi said, turning to face the group. The Saladin story suggests that there is something deeper than our behavior, something philosophers call our way of being, or our regard for others. The philosopher Martin Buber demonstrated that at all times, no matter what we might be doing, we are always in the world in either an I-it or I-thou way. In other words, we are always seeing others either as objects, as obstacles, for example, or as vehicles or irrelevancies, or we are seeing them as people. To put it in terms of the Saladin story, there are two ways to take Jerusalem, from people or from objects. Who cares how you take it then? Lou blurted, suddenly feeling energized for another round. If you have to take it, you have to take it. It's just that simple. A soldier doesn't have the luxury of worrying about the life of the person who is staring down his lance or barrel. In fact, it would be dangerous to invite him to consider that life. He might hesitate when he needs to fire. This comment crystallized a doubt that had been creeping up within Pettis as well. Yes, Lou, that's a good point, he said. What about that? He asked Avi. Lou's worry about soldiers seeing their enemies as people is legitimate, is it not? I see problems with that as well. It seems like it might be a problem, doesn't it? Avi agreed. But was it a problem for Saladin? Yes, it was, Lou retorted, emboldened by Pettis' support. He was completely taken advantage of by the enemies he let leave with Jerusalem's riches. Do you suppose seeing others as people means that we have to let them leave with riches? That it means we must let others take advantage of us? Avi responded. Well, it seems like it does, yes, Lou answered. At least, that's what it seems you've been implying. No, that's not his point. Elizabeth disagreed. Look at the diagram, Lou. You have the behaviors at the top and the two basic ways of seeing others at the bottom. Avi's saying that everything he's written in the behavior area, taking Jerusalem, for example, or paying people from the treasury, can be done in either of those ways of being with a heart at peace or a heart at war. Well, then who cares which way you do it? Lou repeated. If you need to take Jerusalem, just take Jerusalem. Who cares which way you do it? Just get on with it. Avi looked thoughtfully at Lou. Corey cares, he said. Huh? Corey cares. He cares about what? He cares whether he's being seen as a person or an object. Lou didn't say anything. Seeing an equal person as an inferior object is an act of violence, Lou. It hurts as much as a punch to the face. In fact, in many ways, it hurts more. Bruises heal more quickly than emotional scars do. Lou looked as if he were about to respond to this, but finally didn't, slouching back in his chair as he argued with himself about his son. The inhabitants of Jerusalem surely cared as well, Avi continued. But even more than that, you care, Lou, he added. You care whether you are being seen as a person or as an object. In fact, there is little you care more about than this. Then you don't know anything about me, Lou retorted, shaking his head in disagreement. I couldn't care less what others think about me. Just ask my wife. The sad irony of his comment, as autobiographical as it was on this particular day, didn't penetrate Lou. At his side, Carol blushed slightly, clearly unready for the attention that suddenly came her way. Avi smiled good-naturedly. Actually, Lou, I think you do care. Then you think wrong. Maybe, Avi allowed, nodding. It wouldn't be the first time, but here's something to consider. Has it been important to you to get others to agree with you this morning? Lou remembered his earlier hope that Elizabeth shared his views and the energy he felt when it appeared that Pettis did. If so, you do care, Avi continued. But ultimately, you are the only one who will be able to answer that question. Lou felt a tingle of pain, the way one does when a foot or limb has been asleep and is just beginning to revive itself. This issue of way of being is of great practical importance, Avi continued. First of all, think of a difficult business situation. Say a complicated negotiation, for example. Who do you think would be more likely to put together a deal in difficult circumstances? A negotiator who sees the others in the negotiation as objects, or one who sees them as people? This question piqued Lou's interest, as he was in the middle of a union negotiation that was going nowhere. The one who sees others as people, Pettis responded. Definitely. Why? Avi asked. Because whether you're talking about negotiators or anyone else, people don't like dealing with jerks. They'd just as soon poke jerks in the eye as help them. Avi chuckled. That's true, isn't it? He agreed. In fact, have you noticed that we sometimes choose to poke another in the eye, even when doing so harms our own position? This question swept Lou's thoughts back to an emergency meeting just 2 weeks earlier. Kate Stenerud, Jack Taylor, Nelson Mumford, Kirk Weir, and Don Schilling, 5 of Lou's 6 key executives, were standing in their places at the Zagrum Company's boardroom table, giving Lou an earful. They were leaving, they told him, unless Lou gave them more space to run their organizations. They called him a meddler, a micromanager, and a control freak. One of them, Jack Taylor, Lou vowed never to forget, even painted Lou a tyrant. Lou had listened to all of it in silence, not even looking into their faces, but he was burning inside. Ingrates, he had growled to himself. Incompetent, bumbling, turncoat ingrates. Get the hell out then, he had finally yelled. If the standards here are too high for you, then you better leave now because they're not coming down. We're not talking about the standards, Lou, Kate had pleaded. We're talking about the atmosphere of oppression we come to work under. The ladder thing you just pulled on me, for example? She was referring to how Lou had recently removed a ladder from the sales team area, an act that symbolically undercut her attempt to implement a new incentive system in her department. It's a small thing, but it speaks volumes. It's only oppressive for those who can't measure up to the standards, Kate, he spat back, ignoring her specific complaint. And honestly, Kate, after all I've done for you, he shook his head in disgust. You owe everything you've become here to me, and now look at you. He curled up his lip as if he would spit the whole lot of them out of his mouth if he could. I would have expected more out of you. So get out then, all of you. Get the hell out. The March meltdown, as this interchange and subsequent defection had come to be called around the halls of Zagrum Company, had nearly ground Zagrum's work to a halt over the last 2 weeks. Lou was worried about his company's future. Viewed economically, Avi continued, pulling Lou back to the present, this is an insane strategy, but we do it anyway. In fact, it's almost like we feel compelled to do it. We can get ourselves in a position where we compulsively act in ways that make our own lives more difficult, by stoking the fires of resentment in a spouse, for example, or anger in a child. But we do it anyway. Which leads us to the first reason why way of being is so important. When our hearts are at war, we can't see clearly. We give ourselves the best opportunity to make clear-minded decisions only to the extent that our hearts are at peace. Lou thought about that as he pondered his decisions regarding Kate and the others who had left him. Here's another reason why way of being is so important, Avi continued. Think about the negotiation situation again. The most successful negotiators understand the other side's concerns and worries as much as their own. But who is more likely to be able to consider and understand the other side's position so fully? The person who sees others as objects, or the person who sees them as people? The one who sees people, Ria answered. Pettis and most of the others nodded in agreement. I think that's right, Avi said. People whose hearts are at war toward others can't consider others' objections and challenges enough to be able to find a way through them. Lou thought of the impasse with the Union. Finally, Avi said, let me add a third reason why way of being is important. Think about your experiences over the last few years with the children you have brought to us. Have you ever felt like they reacted unfairly to you, even when you were bending over backwards to be kind and fair to them? Lou's mind drifted back to an exchange he and Corey had had just 2 mornings earlier. So it's all my fault, right, Dad? Corey had bellowed sarcastically. You're the great Lou Herbert who has never made a mistake in his life, right? Don't be a child, Lou remembered responding, proud that he was able to remain so calm in the face of such disrespect. It must be pretty embarrassing having a son like me, an addict, a thief, right? Lou didn't say anything, and he congratulated himself for rising above the moment. As he thought about it, however, he had to admit Corey was right. Lou was distinctly proud of his 2 older children, Mary, 24, a PhD candidate at MIT, and Jesse, 22, a senior at Lou's alma mater, Syracuse University. In comparison, he found Corey embarrassing. That was true. Well, let me tell you something, Dad, Corey had continued, sarcastically drawing out the word for emphasis. Being the son of Lou Herbert is a living hell, to tell you the truth. Do you know what it feels like knowing that your dad thinks you're a loser? Yeah, I know you're thinking, but you are a loser. I've been hearing that from you for years. I was never as good as Mary or Jesse, at least not to you. Well, let me tell you something. You're not as good as Mom, or any other adult I know for that matter. You're a bigger loser as a parent than I'll ever be as a son. And you're just as much of a disaster at work. Why else would Kate and the others have walked out on you? This exchange had once again showed Lou that treating Corey civilly got him nowhere. Corey disrespected him whether Lou yelled or stayed silent. I'm going to suggest something to you about this, Avi continued, pulling Lou and the others back from their thoughts. It's an idea you might want to resist at first, especially regarding your children. But here it is. Generally speaking, we respond to others' way of being toward us rather than to their behavior, which is to say that our children respond more to how we're regarding them than they do to our particular words or actions. We can treat our children fairly, for example, but if our hearts are warring toward them while we're doing it, they won't think they're being treated fairly at all. In fact, they'll respond to us as if they weren't being treated fairly. Avi looked at the group. As important as behavior is, he said, most problems at home, at work, and in the world are not failures of strategy, but failures of way of being. As we've discussed, when our hearts are at war, we can't see situations clearly. We can't consider others' positions seriously enough to solve difficult problems, and we end up provoking hurtful behavior in others. If we have deep problems, it's because we are failing at the deepest part of the solution. And when we fail at this deepest level, we invite our own failure.
Just wanted to take a second to pause before we move on to the next chapter. You guys may not be able to relate to union negotiations. I know I can't do that. You may not have had a shouting match with a child recently. but we are in negotiations all the time, every day, with people all around us. We all want our way. That's what Scripture tells us. And just to tell you a little bit about my story. I was directed to go to Celebrate Recovery about 6 or 7 years ago for codependency. And some of you may be familiar with codependency. A lot of people always ask, what does that mean? What does codependency mean? You're probably more familiar with alcoholism and drug addiction. In life, there's almost always a codependent going along with an addict or an alcoholic. All right? And they are known as enablers. They kind of allow people to do things, and they want to help, and they forget their own needs. What strangely happens to us, and I mean, whoever you might identify with that, to me, is that we become controlling in that way. As codependents, we want to make things work the way we need them to work. And so we look at people as objects. This is what I need in my life to feel some sense of control, because everything else is out of control. And it leads us, it sort of leads us into this way of being, this heart at war. People are in my way, they're making my world crazy, and so I need to simplify things, and I need to put things in order. And these people all need to get in line. At the same time as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking of the scripture, "Be still and know that I am God." And you may have heard that. It's a very comforting verse. I've meditated on that many times in frustrating times. I read once about the origin and the language, the original language of that verse, and it helped me so much. The language was about, as if it was talking to a soldier, saying, "Be still, drop your arms, drop your defenses, and know that I am God." And so, just want you to hold on to that as we continue to unfold this a little bit more.
Ed, would it be okay with you? Would it mess you up if we have about 15 minutes left? Would it be okay if we spend some time maybe just talking through some stuff?
Absolutely.
That
No, I like
mess you
that.
up for next week?
No, not at all. Yeah, what did you have in mind?
Well, I was just thinking. I mean, there are a lot of things that struck me as we were listening to it. There was this part where it said where Lou was basically saying, I think to Avi, he was saying, "Hey, look, if you're gonna take Jerusalem, just take Jerusalem. Like, who cares how you do it? Because the goal is to take Jerusalem. So you take it this way or you take it that way. Either way, you got it. Doesn't matter." And so he asked the question. He said, "Who cares?" And someone else jumped in, and they said, "Corey cares." And that was like a really impactful sort of moment for me, because whatever it is that we're doing it to somebody else. I mean, you're doing it to, your example, right? You're doing it to a child, you're doing it to someone you care about, and someone is involved in the equation other than you. And they care a whole lot how you do what you do. And that sort of turned the whole story. It was really powerful to me. So the other thing I wanted to sort of raise was Romans 12. Maybe others want to share, but can someone go to Romans 12 and verse 17?
What?
Romans 12, verse 17. Read it. Yeah. Kelly, can you read it out loud? And just we'll read to the end of chapter 12.
Okay. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord." On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
I think you or Nate led talking about, this book is not necessarily a Christian book, and that's true. But boy, everything in it is Jesus-centered, And so, like when I look at that, when I think about the way in which I relate to my children, my wife, co-workers, my neighbors, people who I run into on any given corner or street. So the Bible says, don't repay evil with evil. As much as it depends upon you, be at peace with everyone. So this book is talking about. And then it goes on and begins to say, what were those last few verses, Kelly? It was verse like maybe 19 or... Robert breaks out until he's like quoting.
Do not take revenge,
yeah,
my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath.
Yeah.
It is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him.
There.
If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head.
So if your enemy is hungry, so first of all, if your enemy is hungry, let's just stop there, right? It's like, who are we talking about? The person who normally your heart would be at war with, right? So, but if your enemy is, so if, as much as it depends upon you, may your heart be at peace with everyone. Then it says, if your enemy, as much as it depends upon you, let your heart be at peace with everyone. You have an enemy. If your enemy, who, as much as it depends upon you, you're living at peace with, if your enemy is hungry, it is impossible to feed them, I think, unless your heart is at peace towards your enemy. If they're thirsty, if your heart is at peace, give them something to drink. And it says, if you do this, it's like heaping hot coals on their head. Which, can I just say, many of us have not understood that very well over the years. We have thought that meant it was like burning the top of it. It's like burning their hair off. It's like putting something hot on your head and just killing it. You just burn them. But that's not the way to understand that. So it is really about to give someone hot coals was a gift. To give. Because it is the very thing that any individual needs to prepare meals, to cook food, to live, to thrive, to survive. So if your heart is at peace toward people, even your enemies, right? When you encounter your enemy who is hungry, you feed them. You encounter your enemy who is thirsty, you give them something to drink. And when you do this, it is giving them the very thing they need to live. Not burn them. You give them the very thing they need to live.
Because that would be a heart at war, right?
Yeah, right. To
Do
burn.
this nice thing that you're sucking.
Right, because at the
Dump
end,
hot
right, it
coals.
says, what was the last verse? It says,
Do not overcome. Do not be overcome by evil.
evil with good, right? So, I don't know. I've got stuff going on in my life. Thinking about who cares. We just sat down with our youngest daughter last night and had a conversation with her. And I was grateful. I felt like my heart was totally at peace with her. When she's 7, but whatever. Your heart could be at war against child, a young
Yeah,
child, right?
Somebody.
Right? You know? Anybody other than me? Defenseless child, you know what I mean? You know, and you know, but and I think in that conversation went so well, and she responded so well, and today's been so good. And I think, but because the question is like, well, who cares? Just pick up the toys, you know what I mean? Who cares? My daughter cares. You know what I mean? Like, she cares a lot, actually, when my heart's at war, or heart's at peace. And maybe all I care about is getting toys picked up or getting her dressed on time. But she actually doesn't care about that at all. What she cares about is how her father's heart is toward her, right? And in so doing, we have a different, my child responds to me very differently because I'm not being overcome by evil, but I am allowing, rather instead, good to win out overall. So this was I don't know, that's a whole bunch of stuff that was just going on inside of me as I was listening and sure everybody else has stuff to say.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's perfectly appropriate to pause, and we are coming up on 8 o'clock. I mean, anybody, Noel?
Okay. Like this class, I came in kind of like through like 2/3 maybe into the book, but what stuck with me was the heart at war and the heart at peace, because I'm a great pretender, because I'm sure everyone has a woe is me friend, and as soon as they come, you're like, oh God, all right, hey, how you doing? Tell me all about it. And you know, you put on the act, you listen, but honestly, I dread it every time they come around. But to them, they truly thought I was concerned, but I was really like, okay, hour tops. I know she's not gonna be here more than an hour. I can do this for an hour. And honestly, the first night I got here, like I guess it was God knew I needed this, because the next day she came over. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try it. So I actually opened my heart and actually listened to her. And it actually, our friendship has changed so much. It's no longer woe is me, it's, hey, let me tell you what I need you to pray for me, and let me tell you how God answered the prayer that, remember we prayed for together? Wow. Because before I would just listen, yeah, girl, But then I was like, you know what? You said you got this going on, let's pray about it right now. I said, you know what? Because if you have the faith of a mustard seed, then we know that God will answer your prayer. And so I just want to say, like, this class, like, changed my life. I came the first week and I was like, oh. I was like, stuff like this was a good class, because honestly, I thought it made me really evaluate myself, because I thought I was like, yeah, I'm a good friend, you know. I do the little woe is me chats, I'm sitting there, I listen. But honestly, I wasn't listening. And the whole time I'm like, okay, if it goes longer than an hour, someone's gonna have to call me, something's gonna have to happen so I can get out of the situation. And so it really made me evaluate myself as a person. And I was like, what if I went to somebody, I really needed help? And the whole time I'm sitting there, that's what they're thinking. They don't see me as a friend that needs advice. They see me as someone that's taking up an hour of my time, and I could be doing something else instead of being truly concerned about what their need is, because there's something in me that draws this friend to me. There's obviously something, and it was supposed to be the God in me, but honestly, that wasn't God at all. That was the fakeness. I was able to fake it, to make it. And so now when I was able to incorporate a heart of peace and God into it, it just changed the conversation around.
It's awesome.
So yeah, it was very eye-opening.
You may have heard it said that one of the greatest needs that people have is somebody to listen. And that's just what, I mean, that's what I hear when Noel is talking, and then also when Phil's talking about, do that for somebody. Give them what they need for life. It's so hard for us to understand that me just listening to somebody ramble on about the same thing they've been rambling on for 2 years gives them something. All I can think about is, like she was saying, oh, here we go again. And my mind's just trying to figure out the escape route the whole time. But So this is the core of this class, and that's why we wanted to walk you through chapter 4. There's another good diagram. There's 2 more good diagrams in chapters 5 and 6. And so we may listen to that a little bit more next week. But just thinking back to my story and how this impacted me and the kinds of connections that it made for me, it becomes so hard. When somebody has a heart at war with you, it's hard to have a heart at peace with them. It's so easy to just say, this is who they are, this is how they're going to be, and so this is how I have to be for my own survival. And I don't know if any of you went to Sunday school or church a long time ago, and even recently I've seen this happen where they have you read a Bible verse and they tell you to put your name in it.
Oh, yeah.
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So you repeat that to yourself and you say your name in there. God so loved Ed that he gave his only begotten son. And that's a very good thing. It's a very helpful thing, because at the core of our being, we need to know that God loves and accepts us. I've taken on the challenge, partly as a result of this book, but also I was kind of coming this route anyway, to put the names of my enemy in there. Oh, that's not easy. That's not easy. And we think of enemies as, the Israelis and the Arabs. Those are enemies. Enemies are just people that are getting in my way.
Yeah.
There might not be a full-blown war, but my heart is viewing them as an object.
Yeah.
Either blocking my way or somebody I can use to get something that I need. And so I would just encourage you and even challenge you. Put that person's name in those verses. You don't have to erase your name. Your name is still in there. And there's room in God's love even for your enemies. And I may understand that, and I may see that at a distance. Yes, God is love, but I know my love is nothing like God's. But it helps me to get there, or at least move in that direction, to read Scripture with that other person's name in there. God so loved so-and-so. So, I think we wrap up at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So take this with you. Heart of peace. And this is just a simple question you can ask yourself. Tonight, we're going to have situations tonight where we're going to be negotiating life with people. Or tomorrow, and you can ask yourself, do I view that person as a person, or do I view them as an object? Do I see them having hopes, needs, cares, and fears just like me? Or do I see them as an obstacle, or a vehicle, or even an irrelevancy? That's almost worse, right? No, that doesn't matter. We don't have to put degrees on it. So when those situations come up, and they will come up, we negotiate life together. And this is the core of this book. And this is what Noelle is saying helped her and changed her life right away on the first night. So my hope and prayer is that here's some great stories coming out of this.
That's awesome. Good. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for. So as we head into next week, encourage you to be reflecting on your own lives. People in your life that relationship is we'll just say it's not easy. Okay? Someone in your life, multiple people in your life, the relationship with those individuals is quite difficult actually. It's hard. It's painful. It's difficult. It's frustrating. You shed tears over this relationship. You have cried out to God over this relationship. You have asked God to intervene in this relationship. These would be the relationships that you should come next week carrying in your heart as we lead into whatever Ed and others are going to introduce to us next. Tuesday night. Next Tuesday is the final week in which we will be reviewing the Anatomy of Peace stuff. But it's a great review, yeah? It's a great review. For those that weren't even part of it, it's a great review.